Now, we shall continue with our questions. Over to you.
Okay. Very important questions have been asked, and I thought before we continue, we should put them squarely on the agenda so that we don't forget about them. What after this? And I was saying to her that Tina, from a point of view, we have 3 issues that we think we should address after this, once we have the 9 reports together. The first thing is what we think we should address is to look at what are the issues which have been raised which are of a constitutional nature, which means ERI must form a relationship with Parliament very soon. This is what has come out, and these are the constitutional matters that are coming out. The second thing then we should say, following from the Constitution, there must be legislation so that it's law. The issue, some of that came here. For instance, the third thing, is it possible that as we discuss, we realize that these things are universal and they must be taught, and these things are of a diversified nature and they must be protected, and therefore a consciousness must be developed in the nation about them, which means then we must say from such and such a time these things are going to form part and parcel of the curriculum of schools, from the lowest to the highest, teaching about that. So that's number one. Number two, I had said I'm going to request permission from yourself, Oguti. I should ask 2 people who have already spoken here. But I think they are raising some of the things which we must not neglect. Again, you know, there is universal things that we have said which are truthful about who we are, but there are other things which need to be addressed because they were of a diversified nature and they were neglected, but they are incongruent in the community. And I wanted 2 of our participants here to give us examples of that. Then as a way to conclude from my side, I will say we're going to hand over to Chief Lapaya. I shouldn't say Chief. So that when we leave, we give ourselves homework. there is this thing, digitization and fourth revolution. These young people are beginning to master it. I would like him to lead us a bit about it so that we see how we factor it with these things that we said here. So I admire her because she was describing to me, together with her elder sister, how and what do they do after they've ended. So I'd like her to please stand up and give us a thing about the diversity part of it, which we must not neglect. And then we know Sisipa Emva, I didn't take the name. Yes. One. Donna, yes. Now she brought up a very important diversity which I think we should take home with us and think about how we address it. Thank you very much. Let me hand over to her and then back here. Thank you very much. Yabo.
I think Masongwa.
Oh, Masongwa.
Good afternoon again. Prof, thank you very much for giving me the floor. Much appreciated. Basically, what I was saying earlier on was that we find ourselves now, well, especially today, that with most families, that we find that a child will have a child outside marriage, and akhulise umntana wakhe, and ekukhuliseni umntana wakhe, laa mntana uyayeka ukuba ngumntana sendlini. Laa mntana amkhulise umntana wakhe, amfundise zonke izinto emele uba umzali uyamfundisa umntanakhe. Obviously with the help of omama nomakazi, but i-father figure yinto engekhoyo phaa kulapha. Ubone ngoku yokuba ngomso laa mntana xa ime phaa esephangela uyakwazi ukuzimela, uyakwazi ukwenza wonke umsebenzi afuneke bamenze kokwabo. Nawuba ngomso kuthiwa hayi mntanam hamba uyosimela kwazi bani, bayayazi uba bathume umntu abamthembileyo ongazobaphoxa, regardless of the fact that yokuba lo mntana ukhule ngaphandle kwe-father figure. Akho malume, akho tami, ukhuliswe ngomama. Now, my colleague had said that she finds it highly impossible that yokuba kubekho umntu ozawukhuliswa without otami no malume. Now, for example, now I've got a perfect example. Yaloo nto phaa ekhaya. Umama wam nesisters zakhe, utata ngumhambi, waza kwecala watshata. Utata wabo waba neentombi zodwa. Ekuswelekeni kotata wabo nomama wabo, they had to assume ezaa roles ezi beziasuma ngootata kwamakhaya. Yonke into kwamele uba yenziwa ngabo. Akukho tamnci, akukho malume, akukho mntu, because ifamily yaphela. So now nabo batshata kwazalwa iintombi. Ezinye iintombi azikendi, ezinye zendi. But in all of that, you find that because we're a changing world, things aren't the way that things used to be. I'm a single parent. My daughter is 4 years old. Umntana ndimkhulise ekhaya, isiduko sakhe ngumahlongwane. Ndimfundisa zonke izinto mna ndafundiswa ngootata omncinci bam naboomalume bam. Ndilungisela ukuba ngomso xa kuthiwa mntanam hamba uyosebenza phaa, uyoma phaa eplant, akwazi ukuya. Ndiligqirha ekhaya. And ndiligqirha ndinjalo ndiyababulela abantu basekhaya yokuba banyula mna. Ndabulela nee-brothers zam uba bathi hayi mntasekhaya silahlela phaa kuwe le nto, ngoba ingathina kokusibhida thina le responsibility. Uyayibona laa nto? Ndiyazazi ukuba ngomso xa kukho umsebenzi ekhaya andizukuma phaa ecaleni ndisonge ingalo. Ndizawuasuma laa role and responsibility le bandinike yona. Ndiyayazi mos uba laa ncamazana xa ingena phaa ekhaya ifunke ithi kuthweni. Ukuba ikhona into erongo eyenziwayo okanye imistake, ndiyakwazi ukrweca umntu ndithi hayi mntasekhaya makwenziwe ngolu hlobo. Uyayibona laa nto? But ekhaya ndiyintombi still. Kodwa laa role le asunywe yokuba yi-role yomntu ongutata okanye yomntu ongubhuti okanye katamnci, nantsi lapha kum ndiphelele, ndingudade wabawo ndinjalo. Uyayibona laa nto? So we need to look at the aspects yokuba in the world that we're in today, nabantwana esibakhulisayo, most kids bakhuliswa zii-single parents, akho father figure at all. Mhlawumbi i-father figure ibe khona but ibe ngumalume lo mhlawumbi uhlala phaa ekoneni othanda uselela ii-drinks zakhe ezimnandi ezibandayo. Laa mntana angaboni value anoyifumana phaa kutamnci, nomama naye angaboni i-value umntana ezayifumana phaa kutamnci. So umama amkhulise umntana the best way that she thinks is best for umntana uba ngomso umntana makakwazi uzimela. We are not saying that i-role yotata is not important. We are not saying that i-role yotata as the head of the family is not of necessity okanye is not seen. Ewe ikhona, kodwa kwamanye amakhaya kwimihla esiphila kuyo ngoku iimeko zinjena. And nje sinjena, it's going to continue on being like this because the single parents are raising strong kids to be able to stand up, umntana azilwela azimele, angadipendi emntwini, angadipendi kumntu of the opposite sex. So these are things that we have to take into account, but not just windows account, but we need to take into account into tradition. We need to take into account windows in religion, spirituality. It's so much more broader. If only kungabakho an innovative way that we're able to combat these things using modern technology to push it forward, because with modern technology, nothing is going to change. Things are just going to continue and they're going to keep on pushing. But it's our responsibility now for us to find a way that we're able to do those things. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mnandingu Paizo, Jango, Kentane. I just want to give you a clear vision of what she's talking about, of being only girls at home. We were 5 girls. First two passed on, and then now we're the last 3. I'm the youngest at home. There are no men folks at home. It's only that our sons and grandsons. So whenever there is something that has to be done, we need to stand up. Fortunately, now say fortunately, singamagqirha amathathu efemelini, ngabatshana bam ababini abangamagqirha then ibe ndini. So whatever umsebenzi owenziwayo ekhaya, I need to be there. Funeka ndiyocela kumem nayibuhlanti ndicele uba indoda eza kujonga wonke la msebenzi uza kwenziwa phaya. So if siyawisa, uba siwisa incamazana encinci, inkomo encinci, I've got to be there. Ndibe ngowokuqala sihlinze senze yonke into, siyohlula inyama sithi leyo yotata because siyakwazi kuyenza, leyo yotata izawushiyeka ebuhlanti, le iya koomama eziko, right? Boomama nizayipheka ngohlobo nohlobo, siyakwazi ukuyihlahlula. Nenkomo enkulu ngokunjalo siyakwazi ukuyihlahlula, siyazi uba izawubheka ngaphi na, siza kwenza njani na. Ithi laa nto ke ngoku, xa kukumeko enjalo, wena ungumama, ungudade bawo, uyinto yonke phakathi kwekhaya, you need to stand up because akekho ke ngoku umuntu ongutata. Unfortunately for thina, asinatata omncinci ekhaya. As she says uba utata came from Africa, right? He came from Zambia, wezapha sazalwa, salapha sagoduka, saphinde sabuya salapha. Asinawutata omncinci. If senze imisebenzi yasekhaya funeka siyimele. If senze yakulo mama, sikwazi ubiza amagqwirha, sibize namabamba uba izani ke nina abantu bazala umamgqwirha, senze imisebenzi yamagqwirha ngoku, izani nizoyimela. Kodwa uba imisebenzi yojango, onyose, ongonde ziyabhuruwa, eneneni ifuna thini?
Fortunately, I know this family. The sister Wabo Omdala, I grew up with her up in Luxi. And it's, kind of a peculiar situation in Nayabo because Nyane Utata Wabo, Wayengumuntu ovela phezulu ngasentla. I think there was some wave at some point yabantu ababevela phezulu i-chefs nento, and he came all by himself. However, what was good about it was that he had a son-in-law who passed on. Into yakhe yonke yenziwa nguye. So there was a father figure in that sense. Eyayenza yonke into katatazala wakhe because wayengena brother up. And ibuhlungu ke mhlawumbi it has to be looked into also. But in our case, as South Africans, in general, we are a patriarchal society. And as such, emakhayeni ethu, xa kusenzwa imisebenzi, if there is no father figure, you go and co-opt, like we said, in our definition of a family. You bring along the extended family as well. And people who have the same clan name as yours. And you regard those people as the father figures of this family. And I think that still, it still maintains that when you have something, there is no father figure, you go for somebody of that same clan name. Utilize the skill that's needed for that particular event, and you know that there was a father here until kutebeko umntana ongumfana apha, and then ends njalo. But theirs is a very peculiar case, and at some point it becomes so sad. I remember I had a hairstylist who was here in Oxford Street. She had 2 girls, but unfortunately she died. The one was still at the school going age, and the other one was about 21. There are friends that were, coming from, I think, close by countries as their moms. But when she was to get married, nobody ever owned her because they said, you don't do our customs, you don't have our traditions. She ended up getting married all by herself. No lobola, nothing. But I think she's doing well. She's in Gauteng. So it's a peculiar case, which I think, needs to be addressed as well, because there are people who come from other countries and come to settle here. Thank you.
All right. Is there one more?
Good afternoon again. Okay, thank you, Prof. Before lunch, we had a small talk with Professor. Prof engaged us with my friend here about the role of African men. I don't want to use the blanket statement, but mostly African men are shying away from their responsibility. That's why there is this confusion. That's why families are scattered. If I may say so, they are scattered. They are supposed to be heads of the family, the leaders, and they should, as leaders, they should play their role effectively. Because as a leader, you have to have a backbone. You have to be firm. You have to have a stand. You have to be sober-minded when doing and taking decisions. Because as an unmarried woman, we have kids, we want to do umsebenzi ekhaya, ucela umalume your brothers, but please malume ngiyabala umsebenzi, bavume amalume. there is this thing called fasting. Omalume bayazazi idozi needonsi, but omalume lenza imisebenzi yethu. Beke babatsiba amaziko umzekelo. Umsebenzi ungahambi kakuhle. Yilini phambili phaya ndiye kokhohle lesingeni. Ndibe neza umsebenzi ndifuna ukunoku ndicela ife okunoku kwabaphansi. Ndikumanga nengxaki ikhula nendaba ibheke idambe. Kuthiwa hayi namsebenzi wenziwa rongo. Ubrother wakho wenza okunoku. Ube disappointed. Wenze into lokuqomba hayi uphinde uye wenze kwakhona omnye umsebenzi. Umalume ndiyamazi akanazo intsiba. Ndicela umalume andincedise abe ngulokhuyo o-responsible azinike ixesha ngento yam ayihloniphe. Ukuba umalume ngondibhatyazelayo ndithi ngokutyhafa nokuphokophwa kwentliziyo ndiye kwezi nkonzo kuthiwa zii-charismatic churches ezi ke ngosisipili bathi nazi wenze amasiko ndifike ndi-adopthe eza style esizakubeka ethi ize mna singandicingisi ndibaleke away from i-traditional practices. Not that I am deserting my African being. I am not running away from that, but I am disappointed, I am confused, I am lost because amathemba am omalume otatomncinci bam abakho bathi bakhona kodwa bafe bethula iminqwazi. Xa benza izinto zethu bangatshatanga abasihloniphi emakhaya ubebujobo ke bumze yiyo nto bendiprofitha ingxeko yileyo ingathi amadoda akuthi aseAfrika makake ame ngqo ake aone apho budoda bawo otherwise sinxibe ibhluke literally nyani ngoku sizinxibile ukuzinxiba oku and sawuzinxiba nandini seba anyani apho lamikhwelo ndihlabela kootata bake bamene up I mean as a gender stand men up as a man. Thank you.
Modelo kokhona andizibamde ndiyabeva abantu abangomama bayagadla i-concerns zabo about the broken society. I believe mna ndiyathanda ureferisha ndingumntu lately othandayo ukufunda ngenkcubeko yethu ngakumbi. Ndiyathanda ukuchitha ixesha ngoyiphanda inkcubeko yethu. Ndikhe ndadibana nencwadi endafumanisa bendikhe ndayithetha kuprof. Ndathi le ncwadi yam le ncwadi ithetha nam le ndim mani lo uthetha apha. But basically what I'm trying to say is that kule ncwadi into endayiphawulayo yandifundisa into yokubana xa sinothi sigethi sireflecte njengoba ezi zikhalazo ndizivayo ningabantu abangomama andicunsuli into kule nto niyithethayo ndizama into yokongeza nokubana ukubonisa ukubana inoba mhlawumbi ilahlekiphi le nto noku-emphasize. You know, andiyithandi into yokubana abantu abangomama in our society or kwi-communities zethu today we treat them as non-entities. We treat them as feminine. Therefore, they are unable to do things the way men do. Yet be explain kakhulu into yobana nabo bayangena ebuhlanti bathini. Let me tell you a story. In an ancient Africa, for successful chieftaincy or a successful kingdom, there were women behind who were taking critical decisions, who were consulted by the men of the council. In an old Africa, no man would punish a child without a mother's consent. I want to rephrase the statement. In an ancient Africa, there was no man who's a father, who's fathering a child, punish a child without a mother's consent. I want to emphasize the importance of a woman's role in a society. It was always big. It was always a big responsibility that they used to play. So we don't need to shy away from that. Instead of that, we need to acknowledge that the existence of women around us is very important. So as thina bantu sithi singabantu abanyangayo, The lives of women were on the line to identify the medicines that can be taken ngomlomo, that cannot be taken ngomlomo. They ended up dying, some of them. They won a responsibility that was carried by women. The society is healthy and strong today, with people who are passionate that I know Impande, Etile, Netile. It is because of women. Decision making. Badla ngokutsho even today, ukubana nobody becomes successful without having a shadow of a woman behind him. No man. So what I'm trying to say is that we need, as a society collectively, to realize and to reflect deeply from our roots, from where we're coming from, desperately, and zoom in the importance of women. And I also want to plead to women that they should not look down to themselves as if the way they should not respond the way the society is treating them. They are not supposed to retreat. Their role is very vital in the society. No society becomes strong without the presence of a woman. So this was just a tip of an iceberg to show the importance of women in our society. And same goes to men. The way and the narrative that we view women, it has to change drastically. We need to look kwizitho zabaphambili into kubana bona phesheya mandulo phaya babefudula besenza kanjani, babebahlonipha njani abantu besini amanina, so that sizophucula isociety yethu. Masingayithathi as kubana it starts from political activism indaba yokubana we need to respect women. It has always been there. It has been always practiced in old Africa that women were respected. We need to respect women so that nathi sifumane dignity that we richly deserve as men. Singabethi abafazi ngenxa basifune respect because we're not giving them respect. Otatomkhulu bethu bokhokho bethu babe bahlonipha aba bantu. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think part of my job, as much as I'm supposed to launch into this digitization and fourth industrial revolution discussion eventually, I think I must just highlight the fact that it is now 2:15. And then that means we've got an hour and 45 minutes to get out of here. So in that period, we must also have had a chance for Prof to make some final remarks on it, and then we will close it off. But I think I just want to start here. There was a comment earlier to say the youth voice in the room is not being heard. I want to speak on behalf of the youth as well, firstly, and say one of the key observations and things that we all need to reflect on, even in the way in which we've been contributing to the conversation today, is we need to first look at the nature of the conversation that's taking place, right? Let's acknowledge the fact that the first half of today was a very successful exercise of ideation where everyone was allowed to air their voices. I don't recall anyone being told to hurry up. Everyone had a democratic space within which to contribute to the conversation. So I think that's the first success element of the first morning session of what we were doing here today. But secondly, sessions like this are very few and far between. And for us young people, one of the things that's becoming evident is that one, a session like this would easily be siloed into a political realm or as a political conversation, right? And not a community or a societal conversation, right? It would seem the institutions or structures of dialogue within our society, which one would argue is a modern society, exist between the silos of religion on the one end and politics on the one end. There doesn't seem to be a conversation happening somewhere in the middle, a circular conversation where everyone feels they have equal space to contribute to the conversation. So this is an example of that kind of conversation that needs to be inclusive to the voices of everyone in dialogue. The reason why that's important is because if the family begins to have this kind of conversation, undefined as a political or a religious conversation, but just a conversation about itself as a family, young people may have the space to speak, and they finally may have the chance to air out their voices. Because let's face it, someone just highlighted that we're a patriarchal society. That means that if we go to the church, it's the father who's speaking. If we go to politics, it's the president who's speaking, right? The youth league is somewhere dwindling or whatever, something to that effect. So young people are still struggling in post-apartheid South Africa to find a platform to have a constructive conversation. Now, I want to then highlight the nature of the conversation. Are we having a constructive conversation? Are we having a destructive conversation? Are we having an enabling conversation? Are we having a disabling conversation? Are we talking past each other? Is it possible that when we stand up to say we want the inclusion of women, we are being abrasive sometimes to the very same men that we want to resolve the problems that we want to resolve around the denigration of women in society? And equally, are we as men insensitive to the needs of women in the way we talk about the construct of the family and the roles and so on and so forth? What is the nature and tone of the conversation we are having? And how is it then likely to bring about a constructive discussion for all of us to reach a mutual desired destination of perhaps social cohesion and nation building, right? Okay, so the point I'm making is that young people are struggling to find a stable environment within which to launch that conversation. And I think elders or senior people in our society, in whatever form or institution that they are in, are the ones who are conducting those conversations and who are the guardians of those institutions, and therefore almost the gatekeepers, disallowing us young people to find it possible to speak in this forum. That's the first thing. So we are unheard. I think that's the final message. In then trying to move towards this idea of the fourth industrial revolution, I'm going to read a quick passage here which will summarize some of the very thematic forms that have come out of some of the things that you were raising. And I'm going to use that to frame the way I want to discuss the fourth industrial revolution and digitization and the topic that we are addressing today. It's written by a man called Ben Okri, right? And he's a Nigerian. He writes a book called Astonishing the Gods. And it goes something like this passage. All that you will see are the lesser things, the things meant to perish. The most important things are the things you don't see.
Amen.
The best things are in the invisible realm.
I'm telling you.
Right? A great law guides the rise and fall of things. What is of the greatest importance grows and keeps on growing as a result of this. So, don't despair too much if you see beautiful things destroyed, if you see them perish. Because the best things are always growing in secret. We have discovered an invisible way. The next stage of our evolution is to be free of our visible things. Then we will become sublime forces in the universe. Therefore, don't despair if you see death. Nothing really dies. The unseen things are our masterpieces. The seen things are merely byproducts. What would seem like victory would be a defeat. What would seem like a defeat would be a victory. An eternal victory of light.
Yes, sir.
Right? Okay, so I'm raising that because earlier today someone was talking about how our society, our history, and our culture is not written down. And one of the questions that the Prof asked earlier was, how is it that this culture of ours, or this family, despite all these assaults, has been able to resist, has been able to remain resilient? Right? I want us to think about this in the context of knowledge production and knowledge systems. Because we always seem to want to criticize African ways of knowing, or black ways of knowing, because we don't write them down. There's always this outcry that our history is not written. But we said the best things are invisible, right? Is that not perhaps why they are resilient? The fact that they are passed down from father to son or whatever and whatever in the dialogue that's supposed to be happening at home, right? That's the first thing, right? It seems like there's an invisible quality to our history and our culture that is able to sustain itself despite all these systems through which it was being repressed. So it's got an invisible quality, right? And then, for me personally, let me use this one as a young person now. I'm a young person, right? I'm not married. No, I'm not yet married. And you know, soccer. Another challenge, Obana. If you meet a lady, you know what I mean? Someone still needs to enlighten me here about the fact that what happens if I meet Umadlamini? Right? So, someone needs to explain that, because I'm hearing too many narratives around this thing. Ndizalwa kwaDlamini, kwajama kwafakazi ne. Umama nguMasikhosana kwaCingimbo ne. Uzalwa yintombi yakwaSofuthe ne. OSofuthe ngamazisi. Right? KoDlamini abangoNdlovu. Utata uzalwa kwaDlamini, uDlamini onguzisi. Umngani wami okwaSikhenjana unguDlamini onguSibakhulu. ubandibene nodadeboss bakhulu ithini le nto? Now I'm leaving that to the elders to answer this, and I'd like us to tackle that at some point, because these are the things that we are contending with as young people, especially in the city. There was Dubani Club. Right? And that moves us to go back. Yeah, so that's the first thing. Right, then I want to get into digitization now, but I just want to make sure that I have tackled all the points that I had written down. Yeah, so for me, that one is about the resilience. And then I think the other important thing was the one about how was this family structured, the African family. That point, yeah, how, right? That point about it being structured in the acknowledgement that it exists within a continuity of the evolution of that family. It's not a finite end that that household is a microcosm of a continuity of that family. So there has to be a deliberate agenda to reproduce. There has to be systems put in place for these Dlaminis to keep recurring and evolve. How do you safeguard that, right? So I think that we must really, I don't like to answer questions, I like to ask them. We must really revisit this nature of the question of what is really problematic that our history was not written down. You know, I don't want to advance an idea there. Okay, so Ben Okri writes what he writes about the evolution that we are now embarking on. I've raised what I've raised about young people. And then I've raised what I've raised about the family structure of African people, understanding itself to exist within a continuity, right? We're still together on that one. Now, it would seem that the destruction of that family structure was the pulling apart of those essential elements that make up that family. Yeah? And taking them and dissolving them into an invisible realm. So you strip them, you destroy them, you strip them. You collapse the system. And then you take its elements and you dissolve them. They disappear. And then they come and emerge through a digital platform. Because let's face it, right? What does really digitization mean, in a sense? It means the physical things are going. So we're going from the physical now to another invisible type. Might not be a spiritual invisible that Ben Okri was talking about, but it's an invisible type. It's going to have an impact on a society whose literacy levels are still very low. Right? Because if you're not able to read a book in its hard form, how are you going to have to transmit the information in a digital form? So there's a gift and the curse that we must explore in digitization, because a lot of the narrative rests on the romantic promise of the success of technology in driving knowledge spread. But it doesn't seem to also dissect fully the question of access to that knowledge. You can have the tablets. In Grahamstown, in one of the private schools there at DSG, they were rolling out iPads. I saw one of my bosses, his daughters are there. They're rolling out iPads, and he's frantic in the office, he's buying iPads and all that stuff. He sends them through. Within a month or 2 or 3, within a month or 2 or 3 of him having bought that tablet, the school is posting on its social media platform an article that says teachers are finding that actually these things are a distraction, right? Or they're, in fact, they're having some kind of undesired impact on the productivity of the learners in the class. Now, the proponents of technological advancement will say, no, we're not using them properly. No one's saying we are or we're not. We're just acknowledging some of the problems that we're going to contend with. Yeah. Because it means now our society needs to think differently about to tackle how to restructure the learning environment, because there's now a new entrant in how we roll out education. We're not saying kick out technology. We're saying let's ask the fundamental questions so that we are well equipped to make sure that when it enters the space, we utilize it to its full potential. That's the first thing. So it's got this impact, and we need to reflect on the fact that our literacy levels are low. We need to reflect that on the fact that education-wise we are struggling and otherwise. And so how do we have a measured transition towards this digitization thing? Where does culture and heritage come in? Right? So, Fourth Industrial Revolution. Fourth Industrial Revolution, the typical conversation you hear about Fourth Industrial Revolution is you always hear people throwing the words artificial intelligence into the air. And then they throw another one, robotics, to the air. You see, this idea of throwing these themes is throwing tangible things. You're still focusing again on but okay, there'll be robots, there'll be artificial intelligence, but no one is saying, okay, how will my interaction with my own family fundamentally change? Right? How is having WhatsApp in the house transforming your interactions into? Who has experienced who doesn't want to go to the kitchen because of WhatsApp sister or mama on your way to my room, past my room. You know? So it would seem that when the TV arrived and it entered the living room, Western living room, the TV owned the conversation, took over the conversation, right? So suddenly, the family priority topic is what Tukarabo did on Generations last night, or on Inspire and so on. So the TV owns that for us already completely. Post-2000, the computers do their thing, the cell phones start becoming very smart and smart and smart and smart. So the cell phones have taken over the mandate of the TV, and they've fragmented it now into small corners, right? You no longer want to sit together and watch Generations. I mean, who wants to do that? Because you can watch YouTube. And you'll just get an update. And Twitter is telling you already what Prof said when he appeared on Generations for the first time, right? So who needs TV anymore? So the family starts to retreat into these silos. Can't buy corn, but buy a better by sitting room in a TV. You know, you're free TV, you're shut now, quiet, Mogola now, and Mogolis. About 2 more, now that's also very dangerous, because it looks like I'm sharing the negative scarecrow approach to this thing. But really, this is what's happening at home, right? This is what's happening at home. So, Prof, in the most physical sense, people who talk about the fact that the Fourth Industrial Revolution is coming, it's probably because they don't have a smartphone. If they still think the fourth industrial revolution is something that's coming, it's because they don't have a smartphone. If they have utilili, we understand. Because there are none of those digital features on that feature phone. So we can say to those people, no, it says fourth industrial revolution. But if you use WhatsApp location share to get to Kunubi Hotel, right? If you are able to videoize this session on your WhatsApp video while these guys are trying to produce it they're gonna go and sit down in the studio and edit it for hours. She's already posted it 10 times in 5 different platforms, and that information is gone. So if Prof wanted to own intellectual property, it's gone. Right? It's gone. So it would seem the fourth industrial revolution is an information freeway or a highway where information travels at a far more rapid rate. And the technologies that are there, and at the root of them, I still highlight the smartphone as one of the most important. They've got something that other innovations have struggled to do over years. They are having deep rural penetration. They are getting to a dresser, right? And you can be a dresser, be live. And so on WhatsApp, be live. Now see, a dresser. And then they are also producing another very interesting social condition. We are all journalists now. We are all journalists now. You go to a party as a young person. A lot of people are dancing and they're videoizing themselves.
Situation right now.
They are broadcasting their lives to someone who's not there. And unlike a video where you record at a funeral or a wedding, it's happening live. There are gazillions of strangers they will never meet who are watching them as they, as they send this information. And this is happening on platforms that are free for subscription. Free. And then one person said something I'll never forget. He said, what is the price of free? What are you giving up in order to get that free subscription? What is the price of free? Lastly, because now I'm going to try and corner in so that we get to Prof.
30 minutes.
As I was sitting here today, early today, I'm not joking. Oh, okay. Before I do that one, let me also just say, I mentioned the social condition of people who are broadcasting themselves. Yeah? The second, and there are many of them, but these are the most easily detectable ones, is that the concentration spans of people have been reduced. So if you want to talk about that classroom effect, and you want to argue in favor of the tablet, but no, it's good for digitization. No one is discrediting that, but then the school is going to have to change the way it transmits knowledge, because it's not going to expect children to sit there for an hour and listen to the teacher. Because every 5 minutes they're gone, they're on social media. There are people who, when they work, they at office, they have their phone, they type, they look, they type. So it's a rewiring what's happening here. And that rewiring is not really easily reversible. It probably is reversible, but the time it's going to take for you to reverse it is worth exploring in terms of how much it costs you, costs your country, costs your economy, and so on and so forth. So for me, it looks like everything is coming full circle. We dismantle this African society in its family structure. we pull apart these elements, we privatize them, and then we launch them on different digital platforms as features and apps, right? Like now, if you want to run, there's an app that must measure your heartbeat and you know, and everyone's running. Have you noticed that everyone's running? People are spending gazillions of money going to marathons, 2 oceans, what. Anyway, everyone's running. No one's having a conversation at home. On Saturday, that time when we said it's crucial family time that we gave up today for this session, Utata will be marathon any weekend. Peep. And the elites love it. You know, it's a class project now. It's really thing to be celebrated, to be seen, to be looking after your health, because that's what you're doing fundamentally. Looking after your health. You got Yak or someone else does it. So and your food is from Spa and it's cancerous and so on. Anyway, okay, so I must zero in now. Yeah, this is my parting shot. I'm sitting on my phone as we were speaking earlier, because at some point my concentration also went, right? Because it will go every 5 minutes. So when it went, I checked on Facebook. Because that's what you do when your concentration is gone. You go to Facebook and say, okay, which articles can I find here? And you draw. I find an article that says, by the way, Google, right now. Google is going through your emails.
What?
Yeah, I'll share the article, but I can share it with everyone. I'm laughing because I took that link and I shared it to a friend of mine also buying Google. Yeah? It's the email. Google's going through your emails. They are scanning what you spend your money on. No. And the title, there's nothing you can do about it. Yeah, sure, right? So I'm not saying this is true, but I'm making this connection. The office in Prof early this week and poses must have been on Monday or Tuesday. The shadow officer, I've got the recording on my phone. I can show you. Kukho a highlighter, a yellow highlighter that is going through my emails. I'm not joking. Papa and myself on Tuesday at office. I'm sitting there, and this yellow highlighter is going through every line in my inbox. DBs are my colleagues. Guys, can you see this? Am I imagining it? Is the guy who runs the office systems, the IT APA, having access and doing whatever? We took a recording of it. We recorded this highlighter as it went through every line. The only way I could disrupt it was clicking onto one of the messages. Email highlighter. And inbox, by the way. Email now. Inbox. Scanning my. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means for my freedom. I don't know what that means for my future and my. But I gave them the content. I subscribed to their platform for free. So they've got my emails, they've got my financials, they've got my CV, they've got whatever. Okay, so what will the fourth industrial revolution mean for the family? Okay, what does the fourth industrial revolution mean for the family? And again, let me do this. Let me go to the digitization part, because the scary thing about South Africa today is that the conversation seems to suggest that fourth industrial revolution equals digitization. It's not true. Digitization is a facet of the fourth industrial revolution. It's probably one of the most powerful components of the fourth industrial revolution, but it's one. culture is another, right? Finance is another. Family is another element. Religion is another element. Because all that it has done, it eventually means we have transposed our culture and practices and exchanges and activities that we do physically day to day. We have transformed them. We have removed them from the physical realm. We did this ourselves. We called it innovation. We willingly gave that away to people to program it into artificial intelligence and other things. La umama obethetha ngo bala mntu wayethe I think it was Jan Smartsman lo wayesithi Tina we don't have a tendency towards progress Tina bantu bamnyama. We're happy-go-lucky people. You know, we want to share everything. Even when we've been abused, we are still willing to forget it in 24 hours time. There's a speech that sort of Dr. Lushaba reads out where he says this guy was reporting to Parliament in Britain about the Negro question. Right? The Negro is a happy-go-lucky chappie who is not easily offended. Essentially, that's what we are. Right? We're loving people. Anyway, so what does this AI mean? It means we are entering the fully designed world. Right? A fully designed world where we want to stop driving cars for some strange reason. So for us, it's cool. So if we brag about buying them and having them, but for us, it's cool. And also, we will do that. But we must also recognize that as long as systems, they also highlight the fact that as Koselali, slap it to I call power grid the Lalin. Wi-Fi is a Zamio figure, is an phone through the subscription here, Vodacom or whatever. But I can't feel it. But the way that urban development is happening, the way that we are embracing things that we call smart cities and stuff like that, suggests that as if there was some kind of public consultation about whether we wanted to get to these places or not. It suggests that we want it. It suggests that for us this is progress, this is innovation, this is, and Omer there too are racing from bit to bit to get these things to come to our cities, right? To get our cities to be smart, to have all this technology and whatever. And I don't know what's going to do to our culture. All I know is culture is probably going to be even more commodified than before. It's going to have to be a product in order for it to survive in the system, because we are moving now into a realm of a transaction-based society. Your only legitimacy is if you are going to offer me some kind of exchange and transaction that adds value to my own selfish interest and perhaps your own selfish interest. It's a total removal of the humanity in our interaction. We are automating that, and then finally some guy is sitting there programming that. So I'm saying we're removing it from our physical grasp and our control as people in the way we want to live our lives actively, to choose to be humane to another person. We're removing it, and we're educating our children. We're educating it out of them. And then once we've done that, we're going to introduce it as software. Digitized software that can predict our reactions. Okay, lastly, I'm done now, but I want to end off by saying, have you noticed now, okay, you know that Facebook, Google, and all these things pretty much are owned by the same people now.
Yeah.
Right? No WhatsApp work.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those people who might be hearing this for the first time, this is why when you go into Facebook and you contact zakho Peter nobanibani kwefonini yakho, but igqibe people you may know. Right? Now again reaction yakho. But it's gone one step further. It's gone to a step where it says they're inviting you, they're adding you as a friend. They haven't. If you're a couple, no, man, they want to Peter and Yamaz, I impress or add friend. But say there's a wording, I forget how the wording is done, but say, put friend request up. But the friend requesting I'd say sends why the algorithm. The artificial intelligence. Because I understand the artificial intelligence, but when you go to green and Ibo machine no ban route. But Tibani blend down for 5 minutes more no ban. It jungle cell phones la public area. No man, the community most man says and suggest no one obtaining ninga Kelan.
Wave at Papa.
Yeah, wave at Papa. Yeah. So we still think that civil liberty only exists and then that's where the democracy, you go vote, and then you go and sit in your corner and you think that democracy is being digitized. Democracy is probably not even, if I even suggest that it's not in the state, you know? Because even the minister or whoever must have a social media account or something, right? So here's the thing. And the president, myself, yourself, everyone, the king, the queen, whoever, if they are plugged into these platforms, and we are all subjects to the technology and the artificial intelligence. Now, can you imagine a society that is dependent on the king for leadership during the day and in the physical meeting of this nature? But otherwise, other times, we are all subjects of this platform that is probably privately owned by someone. Who is really driving the agenda for that nation? You know, as young people, one of our biggest problem is discovering that our parents are addicted to social media.
They text while they drive.
Your mother is preoccupied with her beauty and posting it up on social media. Your sister or brother that just gave birth to an infant, that infant has no say in their pictures being publicly displayed to people he may never know or she may never know. What does democracy mean to that guy? What does human rights mean to that guy who doesn't even know where he is? Right? So it seems our families are totally open. Totally open to who knows what, because we don't know. And scarily, our parents seem like they don't know too. Yeah. Prof, I think that's it. I don't mean to scare people about the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Fourth Industrial Revolution is not a sophisticated thing. Digitization is a particular program of using technology in a particular way to achieve a particular outcome in terms of development. It's a tool. It's a strategy for a certain kind of development that must have a certain kind of social, economic, and other outcome. That's what you call digitization. It has good elements to it, it's got bad elements to it. Our society needs to then sit down and scrutinize what is good and what is bad, what do we need and what we don't need. But the Fourth Industrial Revolution is not somewhere far away. It's in your pocket. Thank you.
Okay, we're about to finish now, but there's few questions that we still gonna cover. In fact, there's a question for each category, for the chief, for the traditional leader, for church minister, for youth,
Okay.
for
I'll push it, right?
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I just got carried away and got emotional. Okay, so as I said earlier, we were very open before lunch. Now we're trying to be structured so that we can come out with a few pointers here and there. And UPROF had this kind of questionnaire type of thing. Some of the questions that are in here have been addressed in loose forms or another. What we're going to try and race through now is to really try and focus the questions, so that if there are any other additional points that come up, we quickly jab them. And this time around, we're going to do timekeeping. So we're not going to allow people to sure. Myself included, I won't get carried away. I want to say, okay, so let's start it off by this way. Let's remind ourselves that izigaba esithetha or the categories that we are talking about are the elements of that traditional African society. The traditional leaders, we acknowledge them as being important to that makeup. We acknowledge the traditional healers as being important in that conversation. We acknowledge the elders as being important in that conversation. We acknowledge ulucha. We acknowledge the priests, priestesses, prophets, prophetesses, and then we acknowledge the professionals. So, the question then says, based on this structure that we've identified of these people who are partaking in the society that we call the family, does the chief, here's a question to all of us, does the chief regard the community under his leadership as his family? Does the chief regard the community as his family, or his or her family? If so, how has the chief managed to keep the family united under a continuous development? We've got 6 questions to workshop, so I'm going to try and give us a chance to respond. Anyone want to take that one? Does the chief regard the community as his family? And has the chief managed to keep the family united under continuous development? I'm gonna give you a stab.
I'll say yes, the chief is interested in the welfare of his people, or her people. You've got to be careful these days. You've got to be careful. It doesn't got to be he all the time. We've got mama chiefs as well. So, in this fashion, that whenever there's a problem in the community, if I've got a problem, I go to the chief to solve. Say we've got a fight within the family. The chief will be involved to sort that problem. So that's why I'm saying the chief is interested and is taking his people as his family, not his subjects or his people, or something like that. You know, there are these negative things that are brought into this chieftainship, where people would say, no, a chief doesn't own me, I'm not his subject, and on all those things. But it depends on what the chief is doing with the people. But it's important that you see them as your family. And I would say the way they are treated, they are seen as a family. In some cases, poor families, unfortunately, these days, the chiefs are not well off to be able to take care of poor people. That is, they are not so moneyed or rich to the extent of seeing to some other families. In the past, it used to be like that. It used to be like that. Poor people in the village would go, you know, sometimes in the churches, the chief's area, you would find lots of people there. Those are poor people from the village, and the chief today is not in a position to do that. I want to appeal. I want to make this appeal to the government or whoever, or the authority, to make it a point, make sure that the chief is put in such a position that he is in a position to look after his or her people. How? How? Because in the past we used to have lots of cattle, sheep, and all those things, plowing our land. You would have lots of food at your place as the chief, to be able to cater for your people as well. But it's not the same story today. But I want to say, if possible, if the government could make it a point that the chiefs, the traditional councils, they've got a budget to look after their own people. Yeah. Thank you.
Nice and brief. Chief, you want to give it a try?
Awungandinika but kodwa ke seyithethe yonke ubawopha lento lenkosi inyaniso inkosi ubantu bazo bafana nabantwana bayo kodwa ke ngenxa yesimo inene sale mihla abantu baphuma ezandleni benza abakuthandayo ngenxa yesimo ke sedemocracy ngoku namandla ke njebekhathile khoyo amandla wenkosi athathu umzekelo ngoku uyakwazi umuntu athi aphelalini yakho inkosi umbone semisinxini uyayazi into bakhonto uzamenza yona akhonto ingenye uzamenza ubuyile wathetha asixele into akazuyenza lento bike wathuma abantu pha njengakudala ba mabamsuse pha ngochithe pha uyokumangalela. So sisimo esi sanamhlanje ungayazi noba ke enyanisweni yintoni enokwenzeka urhulumente wethu ubuntu bethu kwenzeke bubuyele kuthi namandla wobukhosi abekho ngoba ekugqibeleni le nto itshabalalisa ilizwe. Kule nto ayitshoyo tata ukubona apha komasipala kufakwa imali koomasipala uve kuthiwa zijikile kungenziwanga izinto zokuhlala kodwa babe zingena enqeleni akho mali nokujika kungekho ndlela akho mali nokujika kungekho izinto ezizidingo zabantu xa ibingena kwi-transition council because inkosi iyayazi into yoba endaweni ethile isidingo nasi so ilapho nje mntana inkosi otherwise ke inkosi zidinga into yoba zibuyiselwe amandla wazo ukuze ziqhubekeke ziphuhlise abantu bazo laa nto ithi inkosi yinkosi ngabantu so xa abantu bezibhekelisile enkosini amandla wobukhosi akazukomelela kakhulu.
Okay, next question. Since the traditional healers are responsible for the physical and spiritual wellness of the family and community, what has been the challenges that they have observed through change of times, from colonialism to democracy, for instance? Traditional healers, what changes have you picked up?
Thanks. I thought that Manyosi was going to take this, but let me just as well. The first challenge that I think traditional healers have faced from time immemorial is that of recognition. And that recognition doesn't come from outside your own family in some cases, your own community. And I think the system that was introduced in the country actually worked actively to demonize traditional healers. That then translated to the image of traditional healers. There have been so many names that they were given. I'm not going to get into all of that, but at the moment, one of the
most serious problems that traditional healers are faced with is a problem of authenticity. Now, this is a personal opinion. You have quite a number of situations and institutions that just makes it very difficult for the institution to still remain as respected as it was. I am not going to label any of those institutions because it would appear as though I'm calling other people names. But there are a lot of claims by individuals that they are traditional healers, when in fact, it's very questionable. Any traditional healer, I can't point to people in this room, but only some of us have openly claimed that. But there are others who haven't. Because and then we feel in him, we call all manner of displays that this person is a traditional healer and a highly qualified. But people go there and they get charged for services. But one would say this is one of the few things that our current government has actually afforded us, that we do get the proper kind of respectful, even if it's just by word of mouth, but there is respectful recognition by our government of traditional healers. Now, our impact to the family is very debatable. It should, on the whole, be very positive, but due to quite a number of things, in some cases it doesn't come out like that. And one of those things is the truth. I don't know why is the truth such a big enemy for people. But once you tell a person the truth, in most cases you become their enemy. And it's one big challenge for traditional healers. I'm not sure if even the African family can do about that, because it's just an individual to individual who has that kind of opinion. Thanks. I hope I hope I've said it the way I should have.
Emva kwedinara kwakhona ewe ndibuye ndize apha kuMadlamini ndinqinele yena ngoba sifumana i-rejection kakhulu from abantu once you start saying or akubone uba uligqirha kukho that negativity thing abanayo ngenxeni ke phofu yoba nge-experiences zabo abanye abantu kwabanye abantu abazibiza ngoba bangamagqirha. You know, at times I so wish into uba babe kuthiwa urhulumente uyakwazi ukwenza as much as ba ewe sisiphiwe somuntu because uzalwa nayo, kodwa there are basic things where at times you feel into uba ziba common kumagqirha onke, where you are saying hey uba bekusithwa kuyavunywa ukuba kuthiwe nazi izikolo, go and teach abantu about i-traditions, and before i-consultation umuntu athi uya ku-consultation yintoni suppose ba uyayenza. Before aye ku-consultation abantu they need to be taught uba funeka bathi A, B, C, D, E, ngoba abanye amagqirha ngamagqirha ngengomagqirha abantu they're just making money. But wena knowing wena kokuba wena you've got through that path ebinzima ingekho lula ibuhlungu kuwe, as much as begqibeleni uyi-enjoye, but kubekho abantu abazawuyifeyikha kube buhlungu ngolo hlobo. Yenye ye-challenges esinazo ke leyo. There are so many nento zobanjwa kwamagqirha, afika umuntu mhlawumbi sele kudala egula eziswa ngabantu bazisa umuntu ekudala egula endobe engamelanga ba uziswa egqirheni osuppose ba ngoku usiwa mhlawumbi koogqirha okanye esibhedlele asuka azowuswelekela apha emveni koba ebenyangwe nguwe ibe ngoku ixhomekeke kuwe loo nto leyo. Zininzi i-experiences ezibad, i-challenges ezimbi ezi-experience amagqirha angazi uba urhulumente awube uyazilungisa.
omama abadala ndiyabahlonipha banenyawo zinodaka kule ndlela. I-experience njengamntana ophefumula emva kwabantu abadala eye ya-impactwa negatively yi-colonialism in the African spirituality and apartheid. First, it was a promotion of doctrines. In fact, let me be specific. It was a promotion of a dominating doctrine, enforcing to diminish the indigenous belief system that we know as African people as an indigenous one, demonizing all the African practices as flawed. 1800, there was an arrival of a missionary by the name of George Gray, particularly here in Eastern Cape, who established a Peri mission. There is an event, we need to mention this. There is an event that happened during those days when African people were still clingy in their practices. Colonialism, working together with the missionaries, saw a need to destroy the African belief through certain individuals. I would mention Unongawuse was an instrument of the colonial and the missionaries to kill the belief of the African people in terms of trusting with their lives the traditional healers who were never liars. They did that successfully with an event of Unongawuse. We need as Xhosa people to acknowledge that, because the reason that I need to emphasize that is that in the entire South Africa, we need to acknowledge that Christianity started in Eastern Cape, Ugenawai, in the entire South Africa, in the SADC region. Now it is important. Time is against me. Okay, what I need to do, what I need to emphasize is that the enemy of our spirituality was the Western enemy by teaching our people against their own values that kept their forefathers going in peace with no violence and non-racial. Thank you.
Can I just throw a spanner in the works here? Is it possible for us to get an email address to send some of the stuff that we aren't able to share here? So that Sizo was Kubeka more or less in the same kind of easy spirit because Nyanike, it's not possible to say everything. Is it okay? Thanks.
I will make a provision for that. Okay, so now our question is as follows. How have the traditional leaders ensured the transferal of the knowledge and respect of nature and its implication to the African communities? And what does that mean for the African family? I'm not sure if your answers are going to be different from what you may have tackled earlier. But this is about nature now.
Come again?
Okay? How have the traditional leaders ensured the transfer of the knowledge and respect of nature and its implication to the African communities? And what does that mean for African families? This is what they call sustainable development now, or sustainability. Let me just try and give.
Mandithathe ithuba ndibulise uProf ndibulise Chief sibonga abantu abakhona. Mangiqale ngibulela manje emntwini wonke okhona contribution. Noba ke ngiqala uthetha ngoku but ndibulela i-knowledge. Izinto endisheshileyo zinkulu kakhulu andithathi kancinci. Ndifuna ukutsho naku-Prof ukuthi lo mcimbi awuphetheyo nesigqeba sakhe uThixo abasikelele. Benzawuthi ke nemizuzu mibini weshekileyo. Benzawuthi laa nto ibithethwe yokuqala kule nto ithethwayo ngoku ethi i-leadership ayiqali kwi-society, iqala endlini. Irrespective oba kule family kukhona umuntu oyindoda or akakho, but i-values, indlela abantwana abaqeqeshwa ngayo xa bekhula, le nto yobuntu, ukurespektha umntu. Uthe umuntu ebethetha kusasa ubufundiswa uba umuntu omdala ayingulo lapha endlini qha. Umuntu omdala umdala noba umazi, umuntu wasenext door omdala umtreat ngendlela efana nomamakho. Loo nto ayinidi uba ibe kanti umntana ukhuliswa yi-single parent okanye ngabazali bobabini. Yimfundiso oyinikwayo ngumzali noba ubhinqile noba uyindoda ukuhlonipha umntu. Kudala ubusithi noba ukhwele ebhasini, xa umuntu omdala emi ngenyawo ubuphakama umnika indawo yakhe ngoba ngumuntu omdala. Ebesithi umntana noba ufunde utshaya ngendlela zakhe, athi xa ebona umuntu omdala athathe ithishe ayifihle. Kodwa today ezo zinto azenzeki, kumke ubuntu. I think le nto biseyiphendulekile kwakusasa that phambi kokubana iye kwi-leaders ekuhlaleni, kwi-community leaders, kumele iqale efemelini iye kwi-community. Xa isuka kwi-community obvious eburhulumenteni, but problem if i-values zethu as families asiziqwalaselanga zobuntu, siyafelisha, asisoze sibe nazo ne-future presidents because kulekisha i-morals. Abantu abakhona bafunda izinto ezirona kwe-social networks. So ndizama ukuthi i-leadership iqala ekhaya, iye ecaweni, iye PPP, iye kwi-community. Ngeke ube nayo i-leader ekuhlaleni ungakhange uqala uleadisha endlini. Abantwana bafundisa imfundiso right phi endlini uzokwazi ukhupha i-leaders ezi-right. Nkosi.
Esi sikhalo songahlonipheki, I think abantu abakhoyo kule mihla namhlanje imbali yabantu abamnyama abayilandelanga kakuhle. I-history yomuntu omnyama, inkosi were the first people ukulwela inkululeko. Phambi koba sibe nemibutho yokulwela inkululeko, inkosi zilwe amadabi, kwaphala ligazi, zafa ezinye, kusiliwa nabantu abazophanga lo mhlaba. So kuyabaluleka into yoba xa ikhangelwa inkosi ibonwe into yoba inegalelo elenzileyo kwidabi lokulwela elizwe. Mhlawumbi ngenye ixesha le nto kungabikho kuhlonipheka kwazo yinto yoba asazi kakhulu ngembali yenkosi. Uba ukhangela izizwe ezikhoyo ngezizwe apha sinamandlambe, sinamahleke, sinamantinde, sinamagumkhwebe. Zonke ezo zizwe were led by inkosi. Kusliwa amadabi for their pieces of land, for their tribes. So inkosi zilwile. Ndizama uya kule ndawo yento yoba xa kukhangelwa kuthethwa ngenkosi, ikhona imibuzo kwabanye abantu ethi inkosi yintoni loo nto yenza ntoni. Asinafumana imibuzo enjalo. Asinafumana imibuzo elolo hlobo. Ngongathi inkosi akho nto ziyenzileyo. Ndiye kule ndawo kuthethwa ngayo uba inkosi mhlambi i-traditional leaders ne-traditional communities zicontributa njani kwizinto zendalo. Amagqirha amagqirha ayakhuselwa uba imithi yabo mayingafani igawulwe nje nanjani na. Amachiza abo phaa emahlathini kuyathintela uba sanukugawula imithi yonke, funeka kwimithi engagawulwayo iminquma. Umntu ongumnquma kuthiwa ukhuselekile uba ubalulekile, mawungafani ugawulwe nje nanjani. Neminye ke imithi engamayeza esetyenziswa ngamagqirha iyakhuselwa luluntu. Enkosi.
Priests. Priests. Ah, is there one more?
I'm not but I would like to just I would like to ask about izinto ezifana nendawo esePort St. John's, which is called Isimuka. Apho kukho that natural, water, another fragrance yeVicks and ukuphilisa abantu. From what I heard, that place now has been fenced, and I think there are some transactions happening there. Uthengisa land ekhaya. Akukho zinkosi kulaa ndawo. Andifuni ke to open a can of worms, but le yaseXolobeni into, because there are chiefs, involved there, and there are just ordinary people involved there. Inkosi zimandawo. How do they understand their natural resources such that, they are their heritage, they are their means of economic, activities?
Okay. Priests, what has been the challenge in trying to bring together the law of God, the Constitution, as well as the indigenous traditions? How has this challenge affected the development and the sustenance of the African family? One more time. One more time. Priests, what has been the challenge in trying to bring together the law of God, the Constitution, as well as the indigenous traditions? How has this challenge affected the development and the sustenance of the African family?
Ndiyacinga into yoba ingxaki enkulu esinayo yile yokuba xa sijonge ezi zinto zenkolo kubakho utyholatyholwano. Kukho abathi le nto yinto ezochitha. Kubekho bamele kude kuyo. Ndiyafuna ke mhlawumbi ke uvela nento ethi ndiyacinga into yoba inkolo akukho sizwe singekho, so okanye akukho sizwe sisonke sispiritual. Ndifuna uza loo nto into yoba i-spirituality means ithetha ukuthi le nto yonke into esiyenzayo siyenza ngokomgaqo obekiweyo kuloo ndawo. And kuba nezinto, mandenze umzekelo, kuba nezinto ekuthiwa ezoyikiselwayo xa engakhange ibe kanti into ethile yenzekile. Kuthiwe uba ndenze umzekelo apha emaXhoseni, uba ikwekwe kuthiwe khange ityiswe ingcamo yayo, indlela yayo iyapha ayizubanjwe. Sentsho uba ezi zinto ke zizinto esicinga into yoba, endicinga into yoba mna sisonke siyohlulwa kukuziqaphela into yokuba zizinto zokwakha. Ngoba iinkosi ngokweBhayibhile ngabantu abafanele ukuhlonitshwa. isizwe iBhayibhile ikhuthaza kakhulu umzekelo iBhayibhile ikhuthaza kakhulu into yoba ukuze kuhlalwe ngokonwaba nangokuzola kumele okokuba abantu bathandazelane cha ke ngoku ingxaki ke ngoku iba khona yile nto yoba ukuhlala nokuzola nokonwaba oku kufunwa ngani ngoba uba besinoqonda siluluntu lonke into yoba kubani lo befana bakanti lento xa ethe yenzeka yenzelwa bani kulapho ke ngoku kufika sixabana khona singavani khona omnye afuna uveze yakhe omnye afuna uveze yakhe indlela kulapho ke ngoku kulapho kubakho i-division khona enkosi
mandisendibulela nje lo mzuzu ndizawungena nje kulo mcimbi wenkolo yobuKrestu enagalelo libi ukuba siqwalasela into yobuKrestu ayiqali kule mihla sikuyo ngoku lokokuba kuvela izinto kumaKrestu maxa wambe ezingamanyala nezimasikizi kule mihla yangoku into yobuKrestu ayintshanga ewe ke kwisizwe sethu sabantu abantsundu yinto ekhangeleka ngathi ichwechwile ukuba sijonga yona xa siyithetha iba ngumlo xa siyithetha nangoxa sinawunzula kuyo singaphuma pha singabulisani ophuma kwethu ngoba omnye uyibona inkolo yobuKrestu ebalekele kuyo ngoba oyiswe zizinto zakowabo omnye ayibone inkolo yobuKrestu indawo yobalekela xa ungenaziminzi zokwenza amasiko akowenu kanti ayinjalo inkolo yobuKrestu so xa sinawuhamba ke ngalo mrhiba singaphuma kule ndlu silwile ngoba inkolo yobuKrestu inegalelo ekumakheni umntu ukuba ngaba mna ndingumali yakhe nje ndinganikwa ithuba senze umzekelo ngoba ukuba ufuna uqoqosha umntu ungamxelela amasiko alapha ekhaya nemigaqo yasekhaya aphume ngapha kwayo ndidla ngokuthi xa ndisenza umzekelo ngam ebantwini ndithi ugrade 12 nampasa ndina 25 years ndizelwe ndaphulukana nesikolo ndise kwisigaba sobuntwana sobuthineji ndadibana nentsindiso ndisesitratweni yandiqoqoshela isimilo le esawuthi xa sithetha sithi ichwechwile yazodistroya ubuntu bethu ngento esiphuculele ubuntu sendihlala phantsi mlungu wam so eyona nto ndiza kuyo inkolo yobuKrestu yenye yezinto enegalelo ekwakheni icommunity nasekunikeni ingqwalasela ngokokuhloniphana ngokwezigaba zethu singabantu mandime ngenxa yomntu kaThixo
I'm going to be selective today. So I think let's give it a chance.
I greet everyone in the house. I'm saved. And this saved I'm the principal of the school. I'm also professionally I'm the principal of the school. That to mold abantu, if you do not have, you don't put okanye abantwana ubakhulise in the Christianity, then it becomes a problem. As a woman leading abantwana be high school, that's the only thing that I'm able to sustain the discipline in my school. So there's a contribution eninzi kakhulu into yokuba ubuKrestu ubakhulise abantwana ngobuKristu. I don't say other things ezezinye awunobakhulisa ngayo, but the base yomntana makakhule umntana emazi uThixo. Kuba uThixo uyintoni ebomini bam. Mna it has helped me, it's still helping me. Kuzo zonke ezazikolo surrounding me, I'm able into my esam isikolo sibe ne-control ne-discipline through Christ because I'm standing for those learners esikolweni sami.
May I please ask that you submit those questions? We are now sitting at 20 to 4, and we need to answer 3 more questions. Okay, can we go through these questions? Yes. And then we will allow Prof to rule. Thank you. All right, so this one is number 8. Youth, we are interested in knowing how you apportion balance in your acquisition of knowledge, given the fact that in current times, knowledge seems to be stemming from everywhere: internet, friends, family, religion, schools, etc. Which one do you value the most and why? Which knowledge do you value the most and why? Which knowledge source do you value the most and why? Which knowledge source has your greatest attention? Where does your knowledge come from? Which knowledge source has your greatest attention? Which one do you value the most? All these sources.
Knowledge and evaluation the most is from my family, simply because it's direct. They know who I am, and I know that it comes from a place of care. They are concerned and they know exactly like where they want me to be. They've made mistakes, and I know that they wouldn't want me to go through the same mistakes or do the wrong things that they did when they were younger. Also, though, Apekuleni, you acquire knowledge from Siama Mosinkonzo. We come to workshops like this. I read the internet. Obviously, we as Bona Izindo, and sometimes it's difficult to because now we like discover mama I like I think I want to believe in this. For example, ekaya umama ukhonza ewisile andiyazi ephule kwami ndendabona uba no, in fact I think ndifanelwe yile nkonzo because I feel like ndiyatyhaphana kule nkonzo in the sense of spirituality and stuff like that. But I think ekugqibeleni ama ngomntu yeah.
Okay. Okay, elders, do you feel like your position as elders has been compromised? If so, how, in relation to the family building, has it been compromised? What do you think can be done in order to reinstate the position of elders within the African family? Elder ke. Okay, masenze kanje. Kubantu abakhulu ngamafa. Kubantu abakhulu ngamafa. Inkonde eziphakathi kwethu. Nisayinikwa na imbeko. Okanye indawo yenu enifaneleyo phakathi koluntu. Ukuba akunjalo, nicinga ukuba kungenziwa njani ukubuyiselwa kwesikhundla senu phakathi koluntu?
Ndicinga uba mna njengoba singabantu abadala besesitshilo kwakusasa bebethethile abantu bathi masibuyele nembo. zonke ezinto sithetha ngazo zokulungisa isimilo somuntu zihambe zidibana apho zidibana khona. Ndifuna ukuthi umdali wethu wasidala safana neminwe yesandla, asafana, asalingana. Wayeyazi, wayengaphazamanga into wayeyenza. Wayeyazi uba aba abantu bawuthetha nam ngolu hlobo, aba bathethe nam ngolu hlobo, aba bathethe nam ngolu hlobo. Ndiyamnqinela umem, ewe ezikolweni siyathandazisa. Kodwa njengoba sithandazisa nje izinto ziye zisiba worse. Isimilo simkile. Ndifuna uthetha inyani, isimilo simkile bantwaneni. Uyabona ubangaba uyakwazi izikolo zisedolophini. Xa ugqitha kwaba bantwana ungutishara wesinye isikolo, bayabulisa. Afternoon ma'am, afternoon sir. Kodwa aba bethu ugqithana naye apha kwikhorido, akatsho noba molo kakujonga nokujonga. Uba uthe molo ejoye ngapha, ukuthetha eklasini ewe. Hayi. Isimilo ke asikho. Kangangwa ndinalanto ithi mna babekusiya ngam benocela abantu khe baziqolasele zonke ezinkolo zethu bazihamba njani na, ngoba umuntu ngamnye uzowushayinisa inkolo yakhe. Ndikhulele ecaweni, ndingumama wecawa, kodwa akukho hlonipho ndayifumana ngathi kusesiphehlweni. Akho ndawo kuhlonitshwa ngathi kuyiyo kuloo ndawo, uyaqeqeshwa umntu apha. Uba uphume apho ungekabi nasimilo, yazi ke uba ineneni nje wawuzelwe ungenaso. Akukho mntu uqeqeshwa ngathi ngumntu phaya apha ungenawujonga umama wakho okanye utata wakho ukunyanga umjonga pha ekolweni, ujonge ezantsi ugwaqe ngamadolo, yonke into yenzayo uthethela phantsi. Kodwa ndingumama ecawa ndinje, nendizibona ecaweni ziyandothusa ngexesha ndithi awu ibuhlungu ke le nto, ngoba kaloku apha ndizophilisa elinye icala lam lasemoyeni. Ndinalo eli cala lam lasemoyeni lentsimbi, ndinalo eli lasemoyeni loba funeka ndithandazile. Kodwa uphume ngexesha uqonda into yoba ingasikuphinde ufike ephendlini uphinde uguqe ngedolo uphinde uthandaze. Isimilo asikho. Ukubuyiselwa kwethu bantu abadala sihlonitshwe. Ineneni kwafuneka sibuyele embo kuqala apha emakhayeni. Iqala ekhaya, ayiqala esikolweni, ayiqala iphi. Charity begins at home.
Bendicinga xa kuthethwa ngengwebu kuthethwa ngawe bawuseroka. Nam ndi-5 apha ungumkhulu wangonyaka omnye. Ibuhlungu into yokubandakanyeka kwabantu abakhulu kwezi mini zanamhlanje ekuqhuqheni isimilo sabantwana banamhlanje. Akho ndimbi ke ngathi uthetha nomntwana bengathi akuthethi. Zikhona ezo zinto, zibangelwa ke zezi zinto. Mna kuqala umuntu omkhulu kubalulekile into yoba ndiqiniseke sam isimilo kuqala sisulungekile. Ndisukwazi ulungisa eso ndibone somnye umntu esingalunganga. Because zikhona cases ezinjalo apho ubona into yoba ngumntu omkhulu ingxaki apho, abantwana bakopa kuye. So kubalulekile singabantu abakhulu nathi masikwazi uyibona loo nto. Yabona ngoku napha ezilalini ngenxa mhlawumbi ndazi noba yidemokhrasi nali, ezaa ntlanganiso bezibanjwa phaa enkundleni kwasibona sapheliswa. Kuthiwa akho ntlanganiso mayobanjelwa ngasebuhlanti, wonke umntu makabe sentlanganisweni ibheke eholweni. Phaa ufumane izimilo ezidlaka-dlaka ezithetha ukuthanda kwazo ebantwini abakhulu. Sarhoxa sabuya umva apho. Akunahamba uyokuxelelwa izinto ezingabhadlanga ngumntwana. Awukwazi unyamezela loo nto. kodwa kuthiwa kwabakho ezo ndibano zinjalo abantwana abamnazimini yabona bekuyizolo oku bekukho into ibelapha kwamasipala apho kubekho ulutsha oluzimisele ukuba luzawungqola ngokuthetha imicimbi ebalulekileyo apha yokwakha but bayangqola banengqola abanayo ba ikwayile nto ke yobalekisa abantu abakhulu kwizinto eziphilileyo zobuzwe bashenxe kuzo ngenxa yongabikho kwembeko ebantwaneni iyatya ke loo nto kubhetele uba ibinakho ukuqwalaselwa asikuba sizibaleka izinto kuba singafuni ubakho kuzo kungenxa yesimilo esifumanekayo. Enkosi dad.
Mama, can I ask that because the topic is the elders, ne? I'm sure Sizapina spend a chance to professor and the closing remarks because some of these themes they interlink. Yeah, so I think before the last point, I'm going to move number 10 to number 11. I think this one is important for all of us because all of us are from Blackwood. This one says, do you think that the Constitution has been used as a tool to build or to destroy the African family? Is it advancing and championing the welfare of the African family? If not, what should be done? You know, like a discussion there is top of the last one, right? Okay, put it up. Then I'm going to work my way down. This one is about the Constitution.
Enkosi Mhlaba ngaphambili ndijonge imiba ngemiba apha ndifuna ukuthi in some aspects i-constitution strengthens i-community nobuntu ndijonge kwezi zinto bezikhankanywa apha indaba ye-tolerance ngokwenkolo ukuba siyamamela ikhona itendency yento kokuba kuba inkolo yakho osuka kuyo iyethile ufune ukugxila kuyo kanti uba singakhe sithabathe mhlambi umzekelo wabantwana basengaba baphuma kwinkolo ngenkolo so ukuba uzawugxila kule inkolo wena ukholelwa kuyo usengawacinezela amalungelo omnye umuntu ngokwenkolo i-culture is not static ibifanele uba iyakwazi ukumuva with times and I believe intoba i-constitution should be above ndizawuthatha nje umzekelo phaa kubhuti ubhuti phaa uthi uyinkulu kwandlunkulu kwi-polygamous marriage ngokomo wakhona njengenkulu nguye ofanele ubukhokela amasiko uba ndi-correct now wenza esakhe isigqibo sokuzikhethela inkolo yakhe now inkolo yobuKristu ekufanele uba nekhaya libe tolerant to that and accommodative because unelungelo lokuzikhethela le akholelwa kuyo kodwa uthi ikhaya laye lamchitha so ndicinga ba ke ngoku apha there are people who tend to believe to be above i-constitution ndiyafuna unyathela ndingagxili ngamanye amaxesha sithethile ngento kokuba izinto ezininzi kujongwa kootata bayithethile kakhulu oomama ingakumbi abazimeleyo besenza kwenzeke ufumanise ngoku into kokuba ilizwi lakho alikwazi ukuba bukhali nokokuba mandingathi bukhali mhlawumbi ndisebenzisa a wrong word uthetha into esezingqondweni kodwa ngenxa yobuni bakho le nto uyithethayo ayiswaso
ithetha ukuthi ke ngoku i-constitution ithi there should be no discrimination ngobuni. Ibuya izothethelela there should be no discrimination ngokobuni. So ininzi ke into in our culture, as much as we endorse indaba ye culture, but ibifanele uba iyakwazi ukumuva nangokwemeko. Andifuna ukuyihlaba i-constitution ngokwemiba esenikhe ndayijonga, kodwa ndifuna uthi abanye ezinye zezinto ingakumbi le nto discrimination, because andifuna uthetha ngokulingana kuba sihamba sishiyane nakulo makulingane, kodwa kukhona apho endifilisha uba iyanceda khona. So andingetsho ke ukuthi ijonge ukuchitha.
Kukho abantu ebendisenza baphawula no. Okay.
Our constitution was a book that was written as a Bill of Rights to assist us and the government that had taken into power at that time, so that we live in a democratic country and state, and that everybody's rights are taken into consideration. When the book was done, every single culture was taken into consideration at that point in time. Yet, Yet, now because of the fast or the rapid change that's taking place now, it's a book that needs to be reviewed again, and certain aspects need to be added on. We cannot say that things should be removed from the Constitution, because it's a book which people sat down, and it was not written overnight. There were constant meetings, consults. People were consulted, traditional leaders were consulted, democratic parties were consulted, religions were consulted. It's not something which was dumped out overnight. Yet now, because of the change that's taking place, certain aspects need to be added on. And yes, culture mainly is one of them, but we also need to take into consideration that when we talk of African culture, we are careful in what we want to be added onto the Constitution. Because mainly here today, as we are sitting, I'd like to think that 90% of the people sitting on this floor are Xhosa-speaking people. And everyone that is here, or 95% of the people that are here, are talking mainly on the Xhosa African culture. Yet now we need to take into consideration of all the other cultures before we decide that this is what we want to be added on. Thank you.
We are eating into ixesha likaprof ngoku and ixesha logoduka kakhulu.
60 seconds.
Andiqinisekanga ke nge-60 seconds. Into endizothetha ngayo mna izathi ndimvile umama usigcawu phaa ekoneni ndamva nomama ndineyam i-expect ndiyazirespect ezi views batheqe ngazo and I understand into yobana sisonke singabantu we've got i-opinion esi-entitled kuyo, same as akufunekanga ubana sisuppresse ezabanye abantu. It has to be opened all the time so that i-opportunities ziqhubeleke. Unyathele mama usigcawu kwinto endiyendayithanda, but it's true. Indaba ye-culture should not be static. It should evolve. Like human evolution was always like it's evolving with times. Now, what I was thinking is that, in my opinion, our constitution, it does not favor and embraces the norms and the standards, the values of the Bantu. We are always underdogs when it comes to the constitution. We have to grasp straws, fighting for identity to be acknowledged. Yet we are living with a democracy that I believe it's prescribed yet to us, that we must live with it, because it does not entirely reflect the norms and the standards of the Bantu, which are predominating people in Africa. Irrespective of doctrines, whether you're Christian, you Islam, and you whatsoever, people have opinions and stuff, but when you have your opinion, then they think they're entitled to go you. In democracy as South Africa does not reflect and does not embrace land to preserve the family, African families as diminishing, because okay.
Okay, so let us go, Prof, and the reason for that is, I think is the way he addresses these topics in his closing remarks, and I'm hoping that if he allows us, we'll take each other questions that we're not given the space.
Well, I think it is proper for me to say we have worked very, very hard. And we have worked for a very, very long time. Since this morning, and now it's 4 o'clock. Again, I must also say that I think that everybody who spoke here spoke from a very deep understanding of the African family, but also nobody spared the African family or the Constitution or despised anything. What am I saying? I'm saying that the work that has been done here today is extremely valuable in my understanding. I've tried to listen very carefully. Sometimes, of course, you go, but all in all, I really try to listen, and I think it's extremely valuable information that has come out of here. At the risk of repeating myself, I'll say we're going to take this thing very seriously, and I've already outlined how we move forward from here. But then I must pose a question. People came from different parts to gather here. We shared very valuable information, and I think because of that, we have almost become one. We have almost become one. Now, what is it that we should be doing to preserve this oneness? How are we going to preserve it? Yesterday, when we were discussing this matter, when I came here, I suggested that as an example from elders, with the understanding that we're going to look at our children and say, can they do this or not? Is it possible to form, I don't know whether
a Facebook page,
a WhatsApp, something that will keep this thing together. So that the day when we say, let us now respond to what the whole nation has said about this matter, we can know that we dropped us here among the people who participated and who've been carrying the process forward. In other words, I'm asking whether it is possible to work out a way forward as a group, using the gentleman there who spoke about fourth revolution, AI, robotics, and so on. And let me zero in on that. I stand advised, in my view. Can the fourth revolution AI, digitization, robotics, and all of that, think ahead of us in terms of what we are going to think? That's the first question. Can all that system that is been going to be put in place by the fourth revolution think ahead of us in terms of what we are going to think? And I'm asking that question anticipating something which I would like to share. Both the AI or digitization and the fourth revolution depend entirely on what we are going to think. It depends on that. And that is the difference between us and any machine that has been created. Any. That's the first thing that I'm saying. Can it think, anticipate what we're going to think and work on the basis of that? Or, because we know that it depends on what we think, can we, because of that power, control it to do what we want it to do? I think this has been a very standing question throughout human life. And we've gone through, when we say it's the fourth revolution, it means we have gone through 3 of them already. And that was a standing question. When science was developing, we know that you can abuse science completely, but also you can use science to facilitate quality of life of human beings and other forms of life. My last question is to the healers, indigenous healers in the country, in this meeting. And I'm directing it to them because I know that they divine. They divine in various ways. There are those of Ashama Tambo and can predict the future, and so on and so on. Let me not go into that detail, but the issue that I'm raising is this. Can healers intervene here and say we're going to form collectives which must divide and say, while we know that the fourth revolution is there, it's going to be there, while we know that AI is going to be there, robotics, digitization and everything, we are now throwing the bones and saying to it, so that we can determine as healers, what is it that we should do so that this thing that we're talking about, fourth revolution, must be at the service of humankind. I'm raising that because if they fail to do that, they cannot heal anybody. Because the human race will have been taken over by fourth revolution. But if through intervention, they form collectives and say, let's talk to this thing. I'm guided by what you are saying, what the script that he quoted from Ben Oakley. What you see and what you can't hear, which comes and controls. And I'm giving the power of the healers, that power too, that they carry the power of what can be seen, what is seen, and what cannot be seen and what can not be heard, but they can read it. I'm saying fourth revolution, AI, and so forth are equal to what the healers can do. And when I say that, I'm not discounting religion. I'm not discounting it. If there are any means of divining in the religious sector, this is very serious, because it arrives at a point at whether people will believe in God or not, or will believe in robotics and say, well, let the robotics take over, we shall see what happens. In the prayers of the church, in the communication in the church? Can this matter be raised and discussed? And then a point of reference must arise where the church says, we are going to do this to ensure that belief systems flourish in the context of the Fourth Revolution, and that there is no conflict between those beliefs and what the power of the Fourth Revolution. In my conclusion, I'll say we spoke about elders, we spoke about the youth, we spoke about men and women, we spoke about Amakhosi and all that. There's one little thing that we did not do. We kept talking to it in passing. Although Umama Pa raised it very sharply with us when she compared public schools and Model C schools, the differences between them. Those children who are taking into the public schools and who are taking into Model C schools are the future of this country. Having said what we've said here, what are we preparing for them to hand over, given what we have said here, where we say from now till now we're thinking that we should do something like a curriculum, which will emanate from the discussions here. But the first port of call, you are right, Mama, is not at school. The first port of call is in the family. So what is the family going to do to prepare these children? There is AI, there is the Fourth Revolution, there is digitization and so on. And these children are already using cell phones, which means they are already in the Fourth Revolution. What is it that we should do to answer the question that was answered, which she tried to answer, our sister there, when they were asked about how youth responds to certain things? How are we going to show? Mina, I believe that when our people created the African family, they anticipated so much and prepared so much. That's why we're alive. If they did not do that, we wouldn't be here. We survived so many odds precisely because they prepared. They sat down. I'll never forget that story which somebody gave here, and I don't know what those people, poor, they would walk distances by Ushatisa sometimes, or walk distances by Ubona Umchana. That's why we are able today to sit here and be people and survive all that odds. So now our turn has come. We've created Model C, public schools. Our children speak English, they don't speak our languages, culture is fading and all those. We can't gather like this and then disperse as if we don't know that that happened. What are we who are here going to do so that we say we are preparing now the next generation? That generation is now. What are we going to do to prepare that child so that 100 years from now they should say what I'm saying? They should say we have survived because the generations before us prepared for us and prepared us. Let me end off here and by saying also, I would like to thank everybody very sincerely from the bottom of my heart. As I said, everybody wanted to contribute honestly, frankly, and seeking no favor from anybody and saying what they understand and what they know, and we've captured this. And it has to. There's no choice. It has to contribute quality to what we are going to produce. So I thank you very much. and please spread the word. I'll give him the task. I asked Utliki right here that they must ask for emails. You have the emails, you have the phone numbers. Find a way to create something which keeps everybody in contact, including us in Johannesburg. When that happens, you can be sure that we'll then find a way to do it in the other 8 provinces, so that at another time you begin to get information from the other provinces. If we can succeed in that, we can't be defeated. And especially if we use that communication responsibly to address the key issues that are raised, and not gossip and not now and then detour. There are Facebooks where if a question is being raised and you come in with your nonsense, they cut you out completely, forever, and say you are no longer part of us. That is already controlling the 4th revolution, when they do that. They say we are about this. Nothing else is going to interfere with us. We're going to focus on this thing. Maybe as a beginning, you know that there is already something called black tax. What is that really? Really? And no white person coined that, we coined it. I am so afraid if we look at it and say it's black tax, our being humane to each other. As Utata Begateta, you know, the people before us walked distances. Now we do a bit of practicing Ubuntu, instead of contextualizing like that. So we're paying tax here. Where's tax and our sister and my cousin, and where's tax size? Changes the attitude away from umuntu ngabantu. Thank you very much. I think tea has been organized. I will hand over to Tikizwa to say, I leave tomorrow, but please, humbly I say I learned a lot. And thank you very much.
Oh, Papa, I'm going to share something quick. Okay, quick. Okay, Papa, I'm going to share now. It's a networking session upstairs over coffee. So, Papa, I think I can share up. Okay, that's fine. And I also want to thank everybody for prioritizing this event with busy schedules. And I believe a Facebook page will be created where we are going to continue this discussion in the platforms. Okay, what to Professor Mtuze? I think maybe last day, what I would also think if I was saying. So, so we're gonna continue the social media day by day. I thank you. We can go upstairs for coffee.